Welcome back to the Prickly Pear project, and we're going to cut background fabrics. So let's get started with that. To get started, you're going to want some paper clips good sized and some binder clips, some flat-headed pins, a nice new blade on your rotary cutter, and have your ruler handy. So the instructions tell us to start cutting with bag 2 instead of bag 1. So I'm going to pull out what I've got here. We know we're not going to cut these. These are the paper pieces that we're going to sew our fabric to. So we can put those aside. And we're going to sort out our templates and start cutting those. So the first step is to layer your 1/4 yard pieces. However, I'm going scrappy and I'm using fabric from my stash, so they're all different sizes. But I've got a bunch of them layered. And now we're going to start cutting out templates. So you have to layer your CS1 spike unit and your CS5 spike unit. And then I have 2 of each of these. And my layers are stacked too deep for each color. And I can see I'm just going to make that orange one. So I'm going to make sure I have room. I'm going to double it over a little bit. And then this pink up top, you can see it's very close, but it's going to make it because I only need it to make it to the dotted line on those templates. I can see we've got an overlap here, but it's going to work. So I'm going to just cut that off. Now I've got this stack that I've got to cut apart. And there's cutting lines 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm just going to put it this way and cut on my line 1, because that way my ruler's holding down the fabric in a bigger pile than if I had the ruler on the outside edge. This is scrap. And this gets a clip. Now this is 4 different fabrics and they were doubled, so it's going through 8 layers. With a big blade like this you could go through 10 or 12. More scrap. Now this one, same thing. You're just going to cut it on your cutting lines. Always clip the template to the pile of fabric. Now for this one. And there's several pages. We only need 1 page at a time. Pull that out of the way. Keeping them all in the same order because each of these stacks is fed off of, well, your chain piecing, your paper pieces. And so the top of each of these stacks all goes into the same block, and you want the spikes to remain the same inside each block. The book tells you how many layers you need and how many times you have to cut this template out, and I'm going to continue to cut in this fashion by stacking my fabrics and cutting. And when I'm all done with that, we're going to start to sew. So those are all the center spikes. There's 40 of them. So that means I can do 40 blocks. So I had 32 in the first set that I cut, and I have 40 now. I actually have way more than I need, 72. But I'll get to mix and match that way. I'll have a good choice to pick from when I'm trying to put them with backgrounds. There's a set. So in my bag one, I have little unit M's and the little unit M background pieces, and I need to make the spike units, and so I'm told I need to cut strips for that. So 1.5 inch strips. So I've got some more scrap here, and I have to do 2 1.5 strips of each fabric, and I'm going through 16 layers of fabric. Let's see if I can do it. I did it. Another 1.5 inch strip. It helps to have a brand new blade. There's my 2 strips. Now I have to subcut them. Flip them around. I'm a righty. One, 2, 3.5. So those are all my spikes. Okay, so I've sorted out my spikes and I've sorted out my units. I have 24 and 24 and just 14 because I need 62 units total. So I'm going to keep them in separate little bags so that they're manageable. So So now that these units are done, they're just going to go back into bag 1. So I still have my pieces stacked, and I'm going to cut them 1, 2, 3, 4.5 inch. I'm going to cut a 4.5 inch strip to do my geese with template G out of bag number 3. I have the folds all on one side, so I'm going to work from the end without the folds. I'm going to cut off the salvage edge and start my template cutting. That sounds like a hawk. So I've got all of my little triangles cut with my template G with a couple of extras, and then that way I can mix and match as I go around the border. I'm going to go right back into bag number 3. So the next bag we work on is bag 4, and it is the borders. I've already cut these. They're the 2-inch borders for the inner border, the orange border. And I have 4 strips that are 2 inches by 51.5 inches, and they go right into bag 4. I could easily have cut 6 2-inch by 42-inch pieces and then diagonally piece them together end to end and then cut my 54.5 inches from that. However, I did have a long enough piece, and so I cut it along the salvage. So that's all set. The next thing we do is backgrounds, and we're going to start with our bag 1 and then our background template. So I have my next colors all stacked for the backgrounds behind the little M spikes, and I'm actually going to attempt to cut through a whole ton of layers. I probably won't cut through that many when I'm cutting these into stacks, so I'm going to separate them into smaller stacks, and then I'm going to put one template unit on top of each stack, and then I'll cut on the cutting lines and pin them up. So according to the pattern, I have 4 stacks here, and there are 8 in each stack except for one. I removed one of the pieces, so there's 7 in the last stack. And it's just time to cut them apart, just like we've been doing. I'm going to do 2 here. Then I'll do another 2. And I'm clipping them because I'm outdoors. And then the last piece, I'm going to do this with all 4 stacks. So now I'm ready to cut the center spike unit background pieces, and I'm going to start with my template CS4 layout sheet. So cut 6 strips. It could be 6 different fabrics. It could be, I have 3 different fabrics, 2 strips of each. You're going to lay them out and right side up. This template's about 8¼ inches, and you'll get 5 of them on your strip. So you want 5 stacks of 6. And you can stack them up on top of each other. They don't have to be perfect, they're just templates for oversized pieces, so you have plenty of wiggle room. So I've actually stacked a couple. I actually have 12 pieces under that piece of paper, and there's cut lines on here 1, 2, 3. So you just follow the numbers and cut. You can also, and then you clip them together. You can put clips on them before you cut, and then they won't fall apart. And where it's outside and windy here, we're gonna do that. So I had no problem going through 12 layers. And there's the last one. And now I'm ready to cut out my CS2 pieces for the background on the center spikes, and we need to cut 6 strips of fabric that are 7 inches wide by width of fabric. Okay, you need to cut 6 layers and lay these out accordingly, and cut your rectangles and cut them by number. You'll be able to cut 5 templates out of each set of 6 strips. Once these are all cut, they can go into bag 2. Okay, so those go back into bag 2. So I've got 6.5 inch strips here. I have them stacked 6 deep. 2 of each color background that I chose, 3 of my backgrounds anyway. And making 6.5 inch squares, you need 6 of them. So earlier I cut the gold orange borders to get those out of the way so that I could cut my gold orange fabric for my spikes. So those were put into bag 4. And now I'm using my background colors, and I'm going to cut these borders before I cut the background pieces for my units. So I have a 2-inch border that's going to be right next to the body of the quilt on the inside, and this 2-inch border has to have 2 pieces that are 2 inches wide, 2 of them 48.5 inches and 2 of them 51.5 inches. So that goes right next to the body of the quilt. Then my gold border shows up, and that's next. And then the next border is my outer border, and it's a little wider. It's 2.5 inches. And I need 2 pieces cut at 70.5 inches and 2 pieces cut at 66.5 inches. And then the binding, 2 3/4 inch binding they suggest, not 2.5. And they suggest that you cut it on the salvage of the fabric, and that you cut 4 pieces that are 72 inches by 2 3/4 inches. I, however, did not have a piece of fabric 72 inches long, so I'm piecing mine, and I have 8 of them cut with the fabric at 2 3/4 inches. So those are all set. They go back into bag number 4, and then we can cut the rest of our background fabric for our blocks. So here's my first stack of 6 fabrics that I'm going to use for my DZA template layout sheet. It's 8.5 inches wide, and you can see the template layout sheets are going to lay this way, and we're going to want to put them close together and then cut rectangles and then cut them apart on the marked cut lines. Cut line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now it's important when you go to cut your strips that you're going to lay them out right sides up. If you haven't, now's the time to do it before you cut these templates apart. Take your rectangles and face them all right side up. Then you're going to want to cut on line 1 and clip it, and line 2 and clip it, and line 3 and you can see how big the template is. This is all extra fabric. You're really only using this little part in here. It makes for paper piecing very easy. Easier to place your next piece without having to worry about it matching up. So you're going to want to do this 6 times on stacks of 6 fabrics. When you're all done, I'm going to just go ahead and place them into bag number 3. So that's it for prepping our prickly pear project. We've cut all the papers, we've cut all the fabric. Now it's time to sew.